Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to our Lunch and Learn today. If you do not know me, my name is Tina Malika. I'm the co-president of the Northwest Maricopa County League of Women Voters. I'm also a member of the Education Legislative Action Team for the State League. Helping us with program support is Sarah Beth Spencer, and I am very excited to have three strong education advocates on our panel today. Donna Davis from Education Forward, Arizona, Beth Lewis from Save Our Schools, Arizona, and Marisol Garcia from the Arizona Education Association. After I do some introductory remarks from our panelists, introduce you to them, we'll do some meeting tips, and then we will actually get into the presentations. And we should have some time at the end for Q&A and closing remarks. Just a couple of tips. If you do have questions that you want answered at the end of the session, please use the Q&A tool on there's your little toolbar at the bottom or top, depending on where you have it. You can put those in there and Sarah Beth will be monitoring those. I may at times be asking questions or asking for follow-up as the speakers are talking, but other than that, we'll get to your questions at the end. If there are any unanswered questions, then the advocacy team will do its best to follow up. Speakers may need to do some research and find some answers, and we'll try to get those back to you. Additional questions that you may have or you may even think of later can be sent to the advocacy team. The email is here on the screen. And finally, we are recording, so all this as well as all the other Lunch and Learns will be on our LWVAZ YouTube channel. Just as a little background, the League of Women Voters is 106 years old this year. We are a nonpartisan, political, activist, grassroots organization that believes voters should play a critical role in democracy. We do not support or oppose parties or candidates, but we do advocate on the issues that align with our public policy positions. We have over 800 state leagues across the country, including all 50 states, District of Columbia, Virgin Islands, and I believe I heard Penny say last time that we no longer have a league in Hong Kong. But these local and state groups work on grassroots initiatives to empower voters and defend democracy. And our mission is empowering voters and defending democracy, because we envision a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the competence to participate. So as I said, we had three speakers. Our first speaker is Donna Davis. She has over 30 years of experience in the nonprofit sector, devoting most of her time to organizations that focus on youth, education, and workforce development. She has coordinated with Valley Youth Programs for Valley of the Sun United Way and Greater Phoenix Leadership, as well as working with communities and schools. Donna has also been responsible for fund development for the Future Farmers of America Foundation and has coordinated teacher training program called Partners Advancing Student Success. Donna holds a bachelor's degree in health education from the State University of New York. She is a member of the Governor's Commission for Service and Volunteerism. She's served on Arizona State PTA boards. She was awarded the Phoenix Champion for Children Award from Children's Alliance Action. She has been married to her husband for 45 years, and they are the proud parents of 3 children and 5 grandsons. Wow. And 1 granddaughter. And so Donna is very active, as you can see, in the community. Once Donna speaks, we will be hearing from Beth Lewis. Beth Lewis is also a mom, public education advocate, and K through 12 policy expert who fights for fully equitably funded schools for every Arizona child. She's the director of Save Our Schools, works to bring parents, educators, elected officials, business leaders, and community members together to support our public schools here in Arizona. Beth has taught elementary school and middle school for 12 years. And finally, we will be hearing from Marisol Garcia, who has been an educator for more than 2 decades, 21-year veteran middle school social studies teacher, bless you for teaching middle school, in the Isaac School District. She works tirelessly to make sure that her students are safe, engaged in their learning, and empowered to find their voice. She has a long history of organizing and union leadership, served as the president of the Isaac District Education Association for 6 years. Before her election in 2022, as the first woman of color and the first Chicana to lead AEA, she served 2 3-year terms on the AEA Board of Directors. She's also served on Governor Hobbs' Education Retention Task Force and sits on the AZK through 12 Children's Action Alliance Board of Directors. Marisol has a BA in Political Science from the University of California and a teaching credential from San Francisco State. She is married and the proud mother to her son, Vicente. So thank you, all of you, for being here today. You can see that we have an expert panel with a wide range of experience to talk to us about education in Arizona. So I am going to stop sharing my screen. Donna is going to share hers, and she's going to start us off.
All right. Thank you very much for having me present today. I also am a member of the League of Women Voters in the Northwest Valley, so I am thrilled to be here. And any of you that have been a part of the League of the Northwest Valley have probably heard parts of this presentation before. So I'm going to start with talking about Education Forward Arizona. We work in 3 different areas. We use our voices and encourage others to use their voices to chime in on education legislation. We monitor policy, and then we also do programs. We have scholarships available. We do a mentoring program for students that are in college. And we do an Ask Benji, which is a chat bot that answers parents' questions about the FAFSA application. One of our claims to fame has been the progress meter, the Arizona Education Progress Meter, that we started in cooperation with the Center for the Future of Arizona back in 2016. So it's been going for 10 years now. These are the latest statistics, but we will be updating these statistics in a few short weeks, hopefully. But currently, quality early learning means that this is the percentage of our 3- and 4-year-olds that are engaged in a quality early learning experience. And this particular metric increased by 5 percentage points this last year. And the reason it increased is because we had COVID funding that our early educators were able to use to provide services in our communities. That funding went away last September, and so this metric will probably go back down. But what that goes to show is that funding really does make a difference and improves statistics. Our 3rd grade reading rate right now is at 39%. That went down from last year. That's the 3rd grade proficiency rate. Our 8th grade math proficiency rate has been at 28%. That went up just a little bit, and our high school graduation rate continues to stay the same at 78%. Opportunity youth are youth between the ages of 16 and 24 years of age who are not engaged in either education or the workforce. And so they're kind of floundering out there, and we need to capture them and get them engaged in either education or the workforce. Our post-high school enrollment, that means the students who go directly from high school into some kind of a training opportunity, is at 48%. And then our attainment rate, which is our North Star, is the number of adults between 25 and 64 who have some kind of training beyond high school. And so for us, that's a huge issue. You can get these statistics from our website, educationforwardarizona.org, and you can pull these statistics up by city or town, as well as school district. So I would encourage you all to look for the statistics relative to your particular area. So today I was asked to talk about the budget. And so I'm going to go over where the budget is currently, or where the budget is it for the 26 budget. And then in red, you're going to see the numbers that were proposed in the governor's State of the State budget that she released back in January. So for early education funding, the funding cliff came last September. And so there was funding available with that COVID funding to offer subsidies for parents to pay for childcare for their children. And so that went away. And so this last year, you'll see on the wins, the governor put, well, the legislature and the governor were able to put $44.8 million in the state budget to offer subsidies for childcare for parents. The problem is that hardly touched the wait list. And currently we have over 10,000 children in the state of Arizona that are eligible for childcare that are not able to get a subsidy to put their child in a quality childcare program. First things first is losing their revenue, and they provide a lot of scholarships. There are quality rating system for early education, but they are funded with tax revenue from cigarette tax. And since people are not smoking as much anymore, that funding is going away. And then we have, this last year, we got $3 million for after school and summer care. We got 3.5 for childcare provider coaching, and you can see the other expenses that we had. But this year, all of those things are going away. And the only thing that was in the governor's budget was the $44.8 million for childcare. For K-12 funding, the governor was able to get a 2-year waiver of the aggregate expenditure limit. And there are a couple of bills. I'm not even sure whether these bills are the same bill numbers anymore to once again get some kind of a waiver for the aggregate expenditure limit. That allows the districts to spend, the aggregate expenditure limit was set in the 1980s that did not allow school districts to spend over a certain amount. And while that amount goes up every year, it has not kept pace with, the costs of doing business in a school district these days. And so the waiver for the aggregate expenditure limit is extremely important for education in our state. The 2% base increase is required by law. And so the governor put $174.1 million in her state budget, in her state of the state budget this year. Whether that will happen is, debatable. We had a $37 million weighted count, and that's for students that are of low socioeconomic backgrounds, so that that money can go to provide, much needed extra services for them. And that is not part of this. Well, no, it's forecasted to be the same in the governor's budget this year. For K-12 funding, we had $29 million this year for a one-time supplement for additional assistance for M&O and for capital. And so this year she put in another $29 million. We had $3.4 million for a 9th grade on track program that was not included in her budget this year, but she did put in $2 million for literacy coaching, $76.4 million for caseload adjustments, which are part of the budget every year. She had $271.3 million tied to Prop 123, which I'm going to talk about a little bit, because nothing has happened with that to date. $94.1 million was to complete 3 new schools, and $40.1 million was for construction.
Hey, Donna, before you go on,
Yeah.
can you just briefly explain for anybody that may not know the difference between M&O and capital funding?
Yes. So M&O funding can support maintenance and operations. So a lot of times that will pay for, well, and now it's paying for things like increased salaries for school staff. But it's hard to do that, because then when you lose your M&O funding, you have to take that funding away. So it's better when districts can use it to support, enhanced services like music and art and PE, and also for kindergarten, full day kindergarten in some cases it will pay for, and preschool sometimes it will pay for. And then the capital funding, the bond funding, is to build new schools. And we have a fund, a building fund in our state. We're supposed to have a building fund in our state to support new school construction and to support repairs for aging schools. But that fund has not been well funded in a very long time. And so that is a huge issue for our state. I mean, I'm sure Marisol and Beth can would both tell you that we have a lot of school districts that are falling down, the schools that are falling down around our students because they have not been funded in a long time. For community college funding, she put, or this last year we had $2.95 million dedicated to the Community College Promise Program. And while our universities have had a promise program for the last couple of years, that funding was not available to community college students. And now that community colleges are offering bachelor's degrees, the community colleges really advocated to get some of that funding, and it was given. And this year, she put in her budget, the governor put in her budget $830,000 to continue that community college promise program, which has been huge for the community colleges. It was real interesting because the community or the promise program funds go to the Board of Regents, which does not fund community colleges. So there were some details there that had to be worked out. And the same for the Arizona Teachers Academy that was available primarily to universities before, and this past year became available to community college students. And so this year she put another 2.5 million in that fund, but it's a one-time expense. And so, you know, after this year, it wouldn't be there. And all of these numbers for the governor are subject to legislative and governor collaboration to come up with what these real numbers are going to be. So these numbers are proposed by the governor, but they may not happen at all. We'll have to see what happens when they get through the budget process. This year we've had 1.5 million to fund dual enrollment, and that is, she has asked for that to remain the same, and $6.6 million for adult education. And once again, she has requested that that stay the same. And then 1.5 million for nurse education at the community colleges, which was not part of her budget this year. So, so that may go away. And for university funding this year, there was 54 million for the Arizona Promise Program. 20 million of that was ongoing, but 16.3 million was one time, and 17.7 million was money that came from other funds. And this year, the 20 million should remain, but she has proposed 4.9 million for one time. And you'll see that that's a huge drop from the 16.3 million that we've had this year. And once again, who knows whether that will actually happen. They did get this year 24 million to support speed bonding, which unlocks bonding capacity for capital projects for the universities. And then they got 4 million for graduate medical education, supporting doctors completing residencies here in Arizona, because we have such a medical shortage in our state. One of the big problems that we're facing this year is conformity with the big beautiful bill, or the big ugly bill, as some people are calling it. There were a lot of tax changes made at the federal level, and then states get to decide whether they're going to adhere to the federal changes or whether they're going to make their own changes. And the governor and the legislators have had a lot of differing opinions on conformity in our state. And no matter which way it goes, it's going to cost our budget a lot of money. So these are some of the things that happened in conformity. Like for individual income tax earners, there was ways that they could not have to pay taxes on tips and overtime and certain child and dependent care expenses. So there were these were the changes at the federal level. And the governor really, bought into some of these changes for individuals, but she did not buy into the changes that affected corporations and high earning individuals. So there were changes to the optional standard deduction. That happened earlier, and it's going to happen. It happens again this year in the federal budget with the big beautiful bill. There was an increase for dependent tax credit, And then it gave Arizonans an opportunity to participate in the federal tax credit for individual contributions to scholarship granting opportunities, like our post-secondary scholarship program that we have here in our state. But one of the big issues that we still have is Prop 123. That ran out this last year, and that was money that came from the Land Trust Fund to support schools in our state. So the voter referendum added 3.5 billion over 10 years. And it settled an inflation funding lawsuit because the legislature was required to fund inflation every year, and they did not do that for a long time. And so they were sued, and the suit finally came through and they won. And therefore, the state had to come up with money to pay that inflation funding. So during Ducey's term of office, they came up with this idea to use land trust money to help pay for that, help pay the lawsuit off. So the governor has suggested this year that we increase the distribution from the land trust from 2.5% to 6.9%. That 36.8 million of that go to school facilities building renewal. That 271.3 goes to base level increases, which was on a previous slide. That 72.3 million is added to the basic state aid in baseline funding for education. And that 117.5 million get added to the classroom site fund. And if you'll remember, this was based on a inflation funding lawsuit from Prop 301 that required that, once again, that the legislature pay for inflation, and they did not. And so in 2015, they had a special session and came up with this proposal for Prop 123 that is based on the land trust. And so we have every state gets land from the federal government when they become a state. We have managed to keep a lot of our land, and the trust, there's money that accumulates in a trust for this land, and it's a long-term savings account for education. It funds other things as well, but increasing the percentage of the land trust that went from 2.5% to 6.9% really helped to fund a lot of great things in our education system. And this is how it came out 10 years ago, over 10 years ago now, that it increased the land trust dollars from 2.5% of the land trust to 6.9, which is what the governor has suggested again this year. And then there was 50 million that came from the general fund for 5 years and 75 million that came for the following 5 years. Because of this lawsuit, the legislature this last year, because this funding ran out, the legislature this past year had to pay the 2% inflation costs because of the lawsuit. So it came out of the general fund. So whether they fund that or whether they come up with a ballot proposal to put on the ballot regarding Prop 123 is up for debate. And I haven't heard much lately about 123, and perhaps Beth or Marisol knows more than I do, which is totally possible. But when the initial 123 was given, it was given to the school districts with no strings attached. So school boards made the decision of how to use that money. And this last year, there was a proposal from Gress, Mesnard, Hoffman, and Peterson to increase the distribution to the 6.9%, and then to spend that money basically on teacher salaries. And you know, that's an issue because when you just fund that, I mean, we need bus drivers. We need a whole lot of people in our education system. We definitely need teachers, that's for sure. But it would be great if this money could go back to the schools and allow the local control of the school boards to decide where the best place is to use this money.
Mhm.
And then Governor Hobbs' plan from the last session. So this is why they could never come to an agreement, because Governor Hobbs' plan was to increase from the 6.9 to 8.9, and then to continue the general school funding, to raise the educator compensation, to increase staff compensation, and then to put 0.5% of it towards school capital for the areas of safety and security. So there was a big gap between what the legislature wanted to do and what the governor wanted to do. And so nothing ever happened with this. And I'm not sure anything's going to happen again this year. And I think there's a lot of angst about what that proposal is going to look like anyway. So that's on the table and something we need to watch.
Donna, let me ask you something
Yes.
really quick about
Yeah.
that. Yeah, you're talking about, the inflation funding lawsuit. Is that related to the recent Supreme Court decision that the legislature has not funded?
No.
No, so that's two
No,
separate things.
the
Yeah.
separate lawsuit that we filed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so let me follow up on that, because yesterday, for those of us who were at Lobby Day, Senate President Peterson made a comment that in the last 10 years, Arizona has doubled its spending on public education. So, based on some of the information you've just given us about how, we haven't been funding it, can you give us, like, how do I want to say this? A brief idea of whether that doubled amount that he's saying we have is keeping up with inflation, where is it in comparison to where it was, before the recession? Because I know at the recession there was that huge drop off where we stopped funding it.
Yeah, and it has not kept up with inflation because they get to fund either the cost of inflation or 2%. So guess which one they're funding?
Okay.
They're funding the 2%. They are not funding the rate of inflation. So it has not kept up. And I was there yesterday at Lobby Day as well. And what he said was totally inaccurate. So for Beth and Marisol, he said that the public schools are getting over
$14,000 per pupil.
$14,000 per pupil. Charter schools are getting 12, and the ESAs are getting 7. And so that's such a good deal for our state. So just so you know, that's what he said.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, aside from the inflation, sorry, Tina, jump in. Aside
No,
from the
that's okay.
inflation piece, there also has to be he's talking about percentages. And when you make a pie smaller, you get a bigger percentage.
Yes.
Because the tax cuts for corporations are so in depth, I mean, so enacted and in depth at this point, that 70% of corporations in the state of Arizona pay $50 a year.
Mhm.
So, there's less money coming in, so they can give out. But then they say, oh, we spent all this money percentage wise. He is correct, but they've limited the amount of money in that could go out.
Right. Right. Thank you. Thank you both for that clarification.
But they're not paying $14,000 a student, Marisol, are they?
No.
No, he's going to include everything that comes along with everything on your, like, kind of your screen, buildings, everything, right? And if he tries to equate it to, well, we're only spending so much for vouchers. That's because you're doing one child. We have 25 children in each room. He likes to kind of conflate numbers across the board. It's very similar. I'm sure Beth will cover it when she talks about vouchers, because that's it's a very constant talking point that it's cheaper to fund individual students than districts.
Right. And I can't think of the website offhand. I'll have to look for that. But I've been on this website before to see what different schools in, my district are spending per pupil. I think that my student's district is around, I want to say 10,000 per student or something, and that varies. So I was like, where is that average at? Who is actually, if he's saying 14,000 is the average, that means some districts are paying more than that, and there's no way I've ever seen those numbers.
Well, and does that also include, Marisol, does that also include federal funding that the schools get?
Oops, sorry. Yes.
Yeah, and we have a very high percentage of federal funding that goes to education in this state.
Yeah, we
So-
get almost $1 billion of federal aid.
Yeah, so that's a lot.
So that number would not be just what the state is spending.
Right.
All right. Thank you both for that clarification. Thank you for allowing me that interruption.
So these are some of the results of insufficient insufficient resources for schools. We've had I went to a meeting already this morning about school closures in the Peoria School District. And then we have, and they also talked about teacher layoffs because they did not pass their M&O override. And then we have 4-day school weeks. Like I said, we have school buildings that are falling down around our students, basically. We have no full-day kindergarten because the state doesn't fund full-day kindergarten. So if schools want to have full-day kindergarten, they have to figure out a way to pay for it. Elimination of CTE offerings, larger class sizes, and then a stronger reliance on bonds and overrides. And that is totally true. And we have to get voters out to pass those kinds of things because the schools need that extra funding. And at the same time, Education Forward has done several polls over the last couple of years, and 96% of Arizonans believe that all students should have access to a high quality education. And we are not there because of a lack of resources. So I appreciate the time to present today, and I look forward to Beth and Marisol's presentations. So thank you.
Thank you, Donna, for all that great information. Just
It
for
was a
those
lot.
of you who are participating, don't forget the Q&A is down below. So if you have questions, put them in the chat now before you forget them. And then when all three presenters are done, we'll go back into the chat and try to answer your questions. So thank you, Donna. Beth, you are up.
So thank you so much for having me. I am the director of Save Our Schools Arizona and RC3, the network. We are nonpartisan. We're fighting for strong public schools across Arizona, just like my colleagues here. I'm going to talk to you a bit about vouchers and just everything that's happening. I'm going to touch on a couple things that Donna just talked about and then launch right into it. So, um, as Donna mentioned, clearly our schools are dramatically underfunded. I think it's important to note that we're funded 48th in the country. And so when lawmakers talk about these historic investments, I think it's really important to point out that we are in no way keeping up with states across the country. And what that means is our students are being deprived of, small class sizes, of, educators who are staying in the classroom, of all of the incredible curriculum and extracurriculars and incredible programs that kids across the country have. So if folks ask you, I just don't understand why we talk about money so much when it comes to public education. The money matters, right? It matters so very much. Anybody who's ever taught will tell you, and any parent who's ever fundraised will tell you, any grandparent who's ever donated to their local schools will tell you, when you have 42 kids in a science class in 8th grade, like my son does, they're not able to do any labs. And that means he's going into high school without any hands-on science, right? So having the second most crowded class sizes in the US is a huge problem, and it's an expensive problem to solve, right? Because you need to essentially add in a ton more educators, but also more infrastructure because you need additional classrooms. And so folks have estimated that that could cost $1 billion a year in investments in order to really get classrooms to the size they need to be for kids to learn. And then, obviously, and Marisol will talk a lot more about this, but, and Donna touched on it, but salaries, consistently rank in the bottom tier, and that is definitely driving our teacher retention crisis. Our student to counselor ratio is second worst in the whole country. Under Superintendent Kathy Hoffman, it did improve a little bit, but we basically went from 50th to 49th. The recommended ratio is 250 kids to one counselor in order to meet students' needs, and we have nearly 700 to one. So what often happens is, again, talking about money matters, when a school has to share a counselor with one or two other schools, an elementary school, if a student has a mental health crisis on Monday, they might have to wait until Wednesday or Thursday to see a trained professional. And that is obviously a huge problem for our students. And it also really, is harmful for our educators because they've got 30 kids in front of them. They're out in the hall with a crying student, trying to help. And, they're now being asked to do 17 jobs instead of their one. And Donna mentioned it, but there was a landmark court decision of, ASBA, AEA, and ASA went, I think it was 2017, they filed this lawsuit saying, hey, our state has not adequately funded school facilities since the year 2000. And the court came back and said, yeah, you're right. We are $7 billion in the hole. So when we don't fund our kids, they're in unsafe conditions, unsafe learning conditions. Our teachers are in unsafe conditions. And it's not getting any better because our legislature refuses to invest. All right, so I'm going to jump into vouchers because obviously one of the key reasons that lawmakers have defunded public schools is to push a voucher program, right? It's allowed them to have sort of this excuse to say, well, public education is failing. It's not failing. They are failing to fund public education. But now they've ushered in universal vouchers. Arizona's voucher program is the most expansive in the country, and per student, it's the most expensive in the country. And I'm going to talk about, all of these details, but it's also the most unaccountable in the country. So for folks that are newer to some of this terminology, a voucher is any system that shifts public funds to non-public schools. And, all of this is by design. We've seen these really, really robust attempts for decades in Arizona to shift all of this funding to private schools. And that's accelerated once Arizona passed universal vouchers in 2022, discarding the will of voters who rejected universal vouchers in 2018. Now other states have gone on to adopt vouchers too, and it's in Project 2025, which all of us are probably familiar with. And it's, it's a huge part of the plan, and it's really dangerous. So in Arizona, we have two voucher programs. There's the ESA, which is the one that we hear about a lot in the news, with diamond jewelry and steampunk lingerie and all sorts of crazy fraud. And that's because those are taxpayer dollars that can be used not only for private school tuition, but also for homeschooling expenses, which, kids are getting $8,000 for a parent to homeschool. That's a lot of money. We just saw Texas passed another universal voucher program, but what they did is they said, we're just going to give $10,000 for kids that are going to schools and $2,000 for homeschoolers, because we looked at Arizona and we realized that's a really bad program. And then we have an STO voucher, which is a tax credit. All of that to say, since 2022, you can see that big arrow, that hockey stick graph. You can see that what started off as a tiny program that was, in theory, going to be devoted to students with extreme special needs has skyrocketed to $1 billion a year. And I think it's really important to note that that wasn't budgeted for. Right. In 2022, the legislature said, oh, we think it's going to cost $35 million the first year, $65 million the next year. It's not really going to be a lot of money. And, we'll just shift the money. The money will follow the child. That didn't happen because so many kids who were already in private school or already being homeschooled who weren't receiving money from the state held out, the families held out their hands for free money. And now we're in this situation where the state can't afford to fund public schools. We also can't afford to fund healthcare or roads or anything else.
Beth, can I ask you something? And
Of course.
this may seem like a very simple question, but so we know it wasn't budgeted, but we know they're giving them these vouchers. So where is the money coming? Where is that money coming out of?
So they basically have shifted. Short answer, in 2022, they made this grand deal where they said, look, we're going to add, $600 million new dollars to K-12 public education. They forgot to mention it's the same bucket. So everything they promised public schools, they've essentially shifted over, and all of these new dollars just keep being pulled from that bucket into private schooling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we've seen cuts across the board, right? I mean, agencies aren't being funded, nothing's being funded, but because this is essentially a mandate from, the Republicans at the legislature, it's just funded, no questions asked.
Yeah.
Because there's no cap. And yeah, it's a good question. So Donna talked about school closures. We were kind of told in 2022, this is a both and. We can have a well-running public system and a private school voucher. And, at the time we all said that's absolutely not true. But I think the public wasn't entirely sure, right? They were being told these lies by the Goldwater Institute, other folks that are pushing vouchers. And then, slowly the other shoes started to drop. And the next year we started to see major budget cuts where we saw school bus routes being slashed. We saw social workers being cut. That first year of Mesa having to cut teaching positions, school closures, more school closures, lots of Title I school closures, Roosevelt, Phoenix L, right? We're now starting to see out in more rural spaces in Pima County as well. And it just keeps snowballing. And I haven't even had a chance to add Peoria to this list, but it clearly is showing. It's not a mass exodus out of public education, but when you're dealing with a chronically underfunded system and you add in a private school voucher, even if a few families leave that school, you completely implode the funding structure, right? And something's got to give. We have this really cool tool. I won't take a ton of time on it because I'm not sure exactly where everybody is from in terms of participants and viewers, but I will highlight this tool in pink here where you can see how many dollars are being drained from your district. It also gives a percentage of how many kids never went to public schools, which I think is a really important thing to note. As you're looking at it, if you're talking about, look, Kyrene had to shut down, I think it was ultimately 5 schools. And they had said at the time, look, we need to cut $12 million from our budgets. And so it's really interesting to look and see $12 million is going out to vouchers in the Kyrene boundaries. And a lot of times you see this kind of equal dollar amount. And what's happening is now kids are losing their choice. We talk about school choice. These families chose their local public school, and that choice is being ripped away from them. So it's not really about school choice. This is always fun. So because I think people's brains explode a little bit, or at least they used to before Craig Harris started doing lots of great investigative reporting. But we've seen wild things being purchased with these vouchers that are, saying families are saying, look, this is educational. My kid wants to be a barista. I submitted barista curriculum. And so I should get to have this $800 espresso machine. And Superintendent Horn is now auto approving any purchase under $2,000 and basically saying, yeah, we'll audit later. We'll ask questions later. And so our taxpayer dollars are going to lingerie and diamonds and private swim lessons and American Ninja Warrior. And, it's really the wild, wild west. There's really no questions asked as long as you can use AI or chat GPT to create curriculum. They're just approving things left and right. And in the meantime, public school teachers, in order to even go on a basic field trip, have to fundraise for 6 months, jump through paperwork hoops, right? Apply at the district level, pay hundreds of dollars for a school bus. And sometimes it just becomes impossible. And a lot of times we just don't even get to have field trips. So the inequity is massive. And then the last few points on vouchers before I talk about the big solution is that, we know it's not about school choice. That's false. It's really the school that's doing the choosing. These private schools can pick and choose kids. And to me, that's actually the most important thing, right? The reason that public education matters is because public education serves all students, accepts all students, right? They do not discriminate against students because they have special needs or because they're English language learners or, because they are lower income or, right, anything like that. And that's why we need to have fully funded public schools. In Arizona, the ADE doesn't collect income data, but we've been able to see through zip code data that most of the folks, or predominantly the folks who are benefiting, are from higher income households, and they were already in private school or homeschool, which means their family could already afford that option, which means they really don't need the subsidy. We're seeing this go predominantly to like Paradise Valley and Scottsdale, where there's a concentration of private schools, areas like that, and not in rural areas. And then, I think this has been pretty well established, but it's important because the initiative that was filed does seek to fix some of these pieces. So currently, compared to any other state, there's no accountability. Most states have some kind of cap. We have none. Most states have some kind of requirement for academic accreditation or like a state test or curriculum standards or certified teachers or background checks or safety. Arizona has zero. And so, obviously these pieces are really important, and we want to make sure that Arizona's program, if it's going to stand, it's going to have these pieces. Oh, sorry. I'm going to make you guys look at Mr. Horn's face for a second. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the ghost children. I already talked about a lot of this, but we're seeing schools shut down overnight. We're seeing, people completely defrauding the program. And Mr. Horn just keeps making it easier and easier to do that. And we're also seeing at the federal level, more and more vouchers. So, we can talk about that separately, but it is really important to fight all of these, encroaching voucher programs as we're looking at right sizing the ESA voucher program in our state. We can't let the legislature force Governor Hobbs into adopting this federal tax credit because it is just going to accelerate privatization in a way that, is even worse than what we've seen. It's just adding fuel to the fire, basically. I'm going to kind of skip through. So, these are the bad actors that have pushed all of this on us. A lot of them are in Arizona. I think the big picture here is just there is a lot of money stacked into this and against us and against public education. There are a lot of people who, are really in this for the wrong reasons. They want to indoctrinate students. They, are seeking to make massive profits off of education and are also just pushing like a very radical, far, far right agenda that does not match, our democratic public education system because they want to privatize public schools. And I just want to name that as I finish up because, often folks ask me like, okay, I get it. Like these vouchers are awful. They're rooted in racism. They're benefiting mostly white, mostly rich families. Like this is really, really bad. It is set to dismantle public education, but why? And, we know that all of the folks on the previous slide are truly united in one thing, which is that they want to privatize public education. They want to make a profit off of it. And if we don't have a free, accessible public school system, then we really don't have a democracy. And I know that the league, is so supportive of public education. And a part of it is because you all understand how central it is to our democracy. But this cartoon really says it all. And this is exactly what's happening in live time to our schools. Public schools are shutting down, private schools are opening up. And, if we don't put a stop to this in some way, shape, or form and slow it down, this is, I think, is really what we're going to see. So there has been an initiative that was filed a couple of weeks ago. It was filed by the Arizona Education Association and Save Our Schools Arizona on behalf of a coalition of educators and families. The main tenets of this are to prioritize child safety in the voucher program, to stop all of this fraud, waste, and abuse once and for all, to increase transparency so that taxpayers really know how their dollars are being used, to put an income cap in place to make sure that, this subsidy for the wealthy stops and we can get some of this funding back into our general fund where it can be used by, for the public good, and to really raise the bar and have academic accountability in all of the schools and programs that are taking in these massive amounts of dollars. So it's a really big deal. It's the first of its kind in the nation. We should have a lot more information in the next couple of weeks, but we are really encouraging folks to sign up to volunteer. This is the current Mobilize. You can take a little, you can use the QR code to sign up, or I can put the bit.ly, the link in the chat. But yeah, we've had, so much interest. It's been absolutely awesome. And I will stop there, but glad to take questions, and I'm sure Marisol can say more too.
Thank you, Beth. Nikki did talk about it a little bit at our lobby day yesterday, and I think what is it? You're hoping to have it ready, or I guess through the process on the 14th of March. Is that what she said? Because it has to go through the legislature, or explain that really quick.
Yeah, so it's currently under a 30-day review process through the Legislative Council. They'll probably take their full time, so we don't expect to hear back from them until, maybe like the second week of March. So at that point, we will be, working with the lawyers, working with our teams, and we don't have a set date of what exactly that looks like, but it's all as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And then all signatures are due July 2nd, and it will be hair on fire. It will be hot. It will be fun, and we will get it done.
Yeah, it's quick turnaround. That was kind of, I guess, what I really should have asked. If you
Yeah.
get it, if they get back to you in March, then that, we need lots of volunteers because that'll be a very quick turnaround on signatures. But
Yeah.
I
feel
agree,
like,
it's very important to people. So I think we're
yeah,
going to get a lot of them.
it's exciting, and we're on offense, which always feels good. And we've done this before, right? Marisol and I, when AEA and SOS have partnered, we've seen this done before in this kind of type timeline. So we feel really good.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Thank you.
stop sharing. Sorry.
Thank you, Beth. No, that's fine. I did have one quick question that I jotted down, and I'm not sure if you or Marisol, or maybe both of you can answer it. When you were talking about, overcrowded classrooms and such. I know every year, is it the Arizona Professional? It's somebody that puts out a report, the percent of classrooms in Arizona that have either no teacher or an uncertified teacher in them because of the teacher shortage.
I think I'm going to punt that to Marisol.
Yeah, it's the Arizona like HR professionals, and as of now we're at 18% of the classroom positions are underfilled or are vacant. And this last semester, so in the fall, over 1,000 educators left their positions during the school year. Not uncommon. I remember when the press asked me directly, like, what is your thoughts on that? Not surprised, not shocked at all. This is kind of the state of education in our state. And so we should all be very vigilant in meeting with our school board members that we elect and our principals, and ask deep questions about why this is happening and what they can do to help. How can they advocate to keep folks to stay in this profession? Because I'm a second generation educator. And things were a little bit easier for my mom, but for me, it is a difficult decision every year to sign a contract to come back under the circumstances. So, I mean, I can start and share a little bit about what we're working on this year at the legislature, if that's helpful for you all.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. I'm Marisol Garcia. I'm an 8th grade social studies teacher out of the Isaac School District. I currently am elected to represent educators up and down the state through the Arizona Education Association. We are the affiliate of the National Education Association, which is the largest union on the planet. We represent not just classroom educators, but cafeteria workers, front office workers, tech, security, pretty much everyone that's in the building that has direct contact with students. We do not represent principals. That's the only kind of weird caveat, but we do represent pretty much everyone that your children or your grandchildren are interfacing with. Our main goal is to ensure that there are safe working conditions, thrivable working conditions, so that workers can show up and feel safe and be able to do their very best jobs for students. As I mentioned a minute ago, I'm a second generation educator. My mom still subs, but she's a 40-year veteran first grade teacher, bilingual teacher all over the country, but mainly here in Arizona. And I think since I started teaching in 2005, here in Arizona, 2006, I've seen a really interesting historical reference to what I see as issues confronting Arizona schools. And that is, we do not have a direct funding line for schools. We are funded out of the general fund, which also funds healthcare, housing, access, pretty much transportation. Everything comes out of the same general fund. So we kind of ebb and flow with what tax money comes in. And we all have to, as you all know, in June and July, kind of scrap for who gets what. And year after year, my union and other ABC groups try to come together to get what as much as possible into ours. And it's really not fun because we're fighting with, wildlife firefighters, and we're fighting with healthcare and housing and higher ed to get the same pot of money when we should actually be working together. And throughout those years, significant things have happened that have either moved us forward or moved us back. Somebody mentioned the recession that happened in 2008 and 10. That was a huge step back. That is when we were cut big time, because it eventually hit us. Once the big recession kind of waved through the country, that's when it started to hit us. And they put all of the funding for education on hold and said, we're going to stay there and not move forward. And we really haven't moved forward. If you look at the numbers, we are actually at the same exact spot that we were in 2008. But if we keep moving forward, there have been massive lawsuits. So two big lawsuits that you heard of today. One, which prompted the original Proposition 123, in which we sued to say that you have not met your obligations in the Constitution that says that every student should be able to go to a publicly funded school. They were not doing that. And we won a decision at the state Supreme Court. We sat down in a bipartisan manner with then Governor Ducey and tried to figure out how can we find some funding to get into schools. And that is a Proposition 123. And it was bipartisan, and it passed, and we were very grateful. But it had a 10-year cliff, and we hit that last year. The second major lawsuit that Beth referenced was in 2017, where ourselves, AEA, and some other groups, the School Boards Association and the Superintendents Association, filed another lawsuit which said that we're not taking care of the facilities, the actual buildings that educators are in. And if you could not talk to one educator who will tell you that the air conditioning always works, the water doesn't, works. We need to upgrade our schools. Our facilities are a working condition and a learning condition. And so for the last 8 years, we've been in a lawsuit, and recently we won that lawsuit. I'm not supposed to say won, but we were affirmed in the lawsuit that the state has not been paying for that. Unfortunately, the people that we sued, the legislature, has said that they're going to appeal this instead of sitting down to negotiate. And we were hopeful that this would be another example of let's sit down and negotiate. So we have two outstanding, lawsuits out there that are forcing this legislature to do what it is supposed to do, the very bare minimum was supposed to do. And again, I go back to being a second generation educator and somebody who taught in another state before coming here. The stark difference of the opportunities that are laid out for our children is undeniable. Our students graduating from high school here in Arizona, will they be fine? Yes, but they are competing with students that have high-tech access, field trips available to them, access to resources that my students could only dream about. Beth was kind of nonchalant mentioning field trips. My favorite field trip that I was able to work out was taking 180 eighth graders to the public library, where we used the public school bus to get them to the public library, all of which were free. Because we do not have the funding to get my kids on a bus and take them to, for instance, a U of A or up to NAU to see the world-renowned telescope that's up there. Those options are not available for every student. And when we were able to take them to, for instance, ASU, we would have to fundraise in the community and go and beg people to give us money. It's not uncommon, and we've accepted this as educators, and I blame myself as well, that every fall I am the person out there trying to grab as many colored pencils as I could get for 99 cents, so that my students, when filling out a map of showing the Rocky Mountain mountain ranges and making sure they have the blue to make sure they can understand the Missouri River, I have to provide those resources to my students. They are not available, and we've accepted it. Kids graduating from high school and college going into teaching profession already assume that I'm getting paid the very bare minimum, which the average beginning teacher salary in Arizona is $42,000. That's pre-tax, $42,000. That I'm going to have to spend 20% of my base rate pay to help make my classroom actually workable, to meet the literacy goals, to meet the historical goals, math goals, everything that I need to meet so that these students have opportunities beyond the 1 year that I have them. And we've accepted this, and we've put more and more layers of accountability and pressure on public school educators. And so I want to stick with that accountability a little bit, because to me, as somebody who studied political science and spent my first career really working within policy and understanding policymakers, this word accountability has become incredibly dangerous. Beth just spent 20 minutes telling you all about the unaccountability of a $1 billion program in our state. While we were on talking, there's a new piece of news that came out today, just today on vouchers, how families have been spending money on them paying themselves and then also buying condoms with our state-funded money. Okay? I can't even begin to scratch the layers of accountability hypocrisy that happen when an Arizona public school teacher drives to work in parks. From the moment I beep my car and walk in, turn on the lights, there are dozens of accountability measures that I must follow when I walk onto campus. I am not allowed to use my First Amendment to talk about what is happening politically. I am not allowed to carry certain things into the classroom. I am not allowed to put certain things on the wall on the classroom because it may upset somebody. I have to use the pronoun that the parent is telling me to use, even if the student tells me to use a different pronoun. There are certain books I'm not allowed to use. There are certain parts of history that I'm being watched to make sure that I don't use. The layers of accountability that go into the state programs are expanding day by day. Just watch one House Ed Committee or one Senate Ed Committee. All they talk about is more and more accountability that is placed on schools and teachers, and never acknowledge the fact they have no data to show what's going on a $1 billion program. Two, that there's any safety mechanisms that are happening within those schools. If I have a child that shows up in my classroom first hour and has a black eye or has clothes that is stained and looks like there's blood on it or doesn't look healthy, I am a mandatory reporter and I have to call DCS, or I have to let the school district know I'm fearful of what's happening with this child. That is not true for the 100,000 children that are being given $1 billion this year out of your tax money. And so my job is to try to figure out, how do we educate the public that this one hand is taking your money and kind of laughing at you, and then the same hand pointing fingers at people who have for generations committed themselves to a system to ensure that we had an educated populace as prescribed when this country was born. And so let me switch over to what I consider the exploitation of Arizona educators looks like. For the League of Women Voters, 80% of educators in Arizona are women. Very few, I can think of 2 districts, almost 3, because the third one's about to come online, have any sort of parental leave. meaning when there's a baby is born. Most educators have to pay to have what we would consider short-term disability, or they are docked pay to have their child, and or if there's a medical emergency, pre-birth or post-birth. It is not uncommon for teachers to go unpaid while they are at home caring for their newborn, counting days before they can go back. We do not have that in our profession. 80% women. That's why most of us have May-June babies, like me and my sister, because my mom knew she could take the summer off and then come back to school. We do not have insurance coverage for our family members. So even though historically this profession was built so that women could work outside the home, this still do not have the ability to procreate and cover them healthcare. It is few and far between that any educator has the ability to cover their children, their infant children, or their spouses, which is a bigger issue of healthcare that we could have to talk about. But this is something that is keeping people from staying in our profession. Right? Is that I can't take care of my kids. I don't have any time off. The state doing its very best to create avenues to have daycare. Most school districts don't have options for daycare available for teachers. The ones that did exist have gotten smaller and smaller. Why? It's the same general fund that pays for our salaries. They're all connected. And so the exploitation gets deeper when we talk about what I like to call unfunded mandates. Every year, legislators come up with hundreds of bills of new and more things that I have to do in order to ensure that I play the critical role that I play in society to make sure students understand. I'll give 3 examples. One is how understanding your relationship with adults, right? Ensuring a second one would be making sure that you understand how safety while you're online. Understanding that, what types of relationships may lead you to be injured. So domestic issues that might be happening. Though every year, new ones coming up. This year, it's an AED. They want to make sure every student knows how to CPR and every student knows how to use the AED machines. I love it. Guess what? Nothing's coming off the plates that we have to do, and there's no funding behind it. So teachers have to go to training for that after school and on the weekends. Are they paid for that? They are not. But they're expected to do it. We have to understand how to support students or spot students who are having issues that may lead to suicide. Important, relevant, I want to do it. Who's going to teach me? When do I take those classes? At night and on the weekends, away from my family where I'm not paid, but I'm expected to do it. So society kind of throws all the issues that we are confronting, social media, healthcare issues, safety issues, onto educators, expects them to do it, but does not pay them for it. There's not a teacher who doesn't want to do their very best job. I've yet to meet that teacher. However, we are literally withering away with the exploitation of our bodies and our workplace expectations. And so what we have chosen to do is fight back. However, the legislature this year has decided to slap us with 2 big pieces of legislation. I'm not sure if Isela mentioned them yesterday, but HCR 2040, which gets rid of teacher unions, essentially says we can't rent spaces on campus, just like the Boys and Girls Club or TPUSA can, but not the teacher unions. We are not allowed to ask people to designate their dues coming out of the payroll. Ridiculous, because every year I get asked if I want to give to the United Way or if I want to be able to give additional insurance for my family. This is not a cost. This is their way of targeting back at us. And then HB 2313, which says that teachers, if 2 or more teachers at a site call out sick, they could lose their pension, they could lose their credential and never be able to teach again. And that is because they're fearful that we may have a sick out. And welcome, this is America. It's called our First Amendment rights. And if people together decide that they're going to use their labor, withhold their labor as an impression, they're actually going against the Constitution. It does feel this year like let's keep going down, like it's such a tired, we've seen this episode before, like we need some new writers because every piece of legislation is like, we've seen this before, we've done this before, the governor vetoed this already, why are we doing this? But education is highly political and we need everyone's help to kind of put our foot on the ground. And I know this organization cares deeply about ensuring our right to vote and ensuring that this country stays strong. But by attacking education, you are attacking the very cornerstone of what we believe in. And every single member of my organization, the 22,000 members who join a union, do it by choice. They've chosen to join to be part of something bigger than them. This is their choice. This is their exercising their free will, their rights. And by the legislature wanting to take that away, it actually is terrifying. So I would love if anybody has any questions for us. We are working hand in hand with SOS on the voucher initiative for one main reason is the more that we fight for funding to go into public schools, it will continue to get defrayed into the voucher program unless we stop this bleeding. It's very much common sense what we're asking. The legislature could do it tomorrow. I think Beth and I would be thrilled. If everything we had in the initiative, they said, we'll do it tomorrow, get it passed, have Governor Katie Hobbs sign it, we'd be like, oh, no need for an initiative. But these are common sense responses that need to happen. And if we could get those passed, we wouldn't have to be initiative. I think Beth and I would love that if all these would get passed. But they've had years and years and years. And they've neglected their responsibility to be responsive and accountable to the taxpayers who are saying, we don't want our taxpayer money going to an under accountable project that after today is getting worse and worse and worse exposed. So there's the end of mine, and I'll leave it open for Q&A or whatever else you need, Tina.
Okay, thank you, Marisol. Will you tell us the numbers on those bills again? Because those
Sure.
were strike everythings, right? Weren't they
Yeah.
something else?
Yeah,
And
they were
struck
striker.
it?
And I also
Yeah.
want to clarify, Donna did mention she didn't say anything about 123. There were piggyback 123 bills in the Senate that did move through education. And they were Mesnard bills. They're SCR 1041 and SCR 1051. Those are the bad 123 bills that did pass out of Ed Committee, probably being heard today in the Senate. The bill to strip the teachers union is HCR 2040. And House Bill 2313 is the teachers can't communicate with each other and be sick on the same day.
Mhm. Yeah, I just saw
Which
a
is
couple
a silly because teachers get sick on the same day all the time. Why? Because we share students.
Well, and for people who don't know what a strike everything is,
Yes.
there's a deadline for you to introduce
Yes.
bills. The deadline has passed. So I think one of them was like a minimum wage bill or
Yes,
something, and they
yes.
struck everything and turned it
Yes.
into this thing
Mr.
about
Grass
teachers.
used one of his minimum wage bills and struck everything, and so did Representative Olson. So yes, we
Yeah.
had a bunch of our members saying, wait, it says this. No, you got to open the bill.
Yeah. Thank you all.
You're welcome.
Beth, I think there was one thing about in the Q&A, if you want to look at it and see if it's something with the newsletter. Oh, you did answer it. You did answer it. I think. Yep, you did. Thank you. One thing that I did want to ask, that we did not cover, and then again, you guys, as I'm asking this, if you have other questions, please put them in the Q&A and we can ask them. But we were wondering, how are the schools dealing with the presence of ICE right now and the fear of that?
I can talk a little bit about that. The cold reality is that Arizona has been living under a similar life that Minneapolis has been living under for over 10 years. So teaching in a school district like I did in Isaac that is heavily based in an immigrant community, we've dealt with ICE, Homeland Security, CPB, police for over 10 years, since the first inception of SB 1070. So many of these immigrant communities and immigration rights groups have consistently every year gotten bigger and stronger and figured out kind of how to work together. And at this point, we meet every other Friday at AEA and strategize how we are going to prepare for a similar situation in Minneapolis. The best thing to do is, and I can put it in the chat for everyone, there are 3 numbers to call in Northern Arizona, in Maricopa, and in Southern Arizona to let people know that you've seen an activity. And from there, all the activist groups kind of jump in and take over. We are one of the activist groups that will look into if it's near a school, and be able to respond. Most of our educators have been trained and worked with school boards to make sure school boards are aware of being trained of what to do. But I'm going to tell you, and Beth would I'm sure agree with me, educators are never going to let a person who does not have a right to be near a child near a child. They are not walking on campus. We have been trained for years on how to do lockdowns. We know how to lock downs better than anybody else in the country. So we know how to lock down. And in the 3 or 4 occasions where there have been ICE near a school, which is near my neighborhood in Roosevelt, school district, or up north near Maryvale, where there's a Boys and Girls Club, or out near Mesa, immediately we were able to surround the community with activists that are there to keep people safe. So I'll put the numbers in there. There's training available. If you get on our Mobilize, we had a training last night with about 500 community members on how to be a good neighbor. How to be a good neighbor, because immigrants are everywhere in all of our communities, and we have to keep everyone safe. But there is a secondary trauma that comes from just the what if, the rumors, the what if this happens. About 3 weeks ago, there's this huge rumor there's going to be a huge ICE raid near where I teach in Isaac, and it just really turned down attendance at school. Teachers were fearful. The entire community was on alert for 72 hours. And that is not a conducive way for kids to come to school and learn. And school should be the safest place for students, no matter what, under normal circumstances or under what we're living in. So the best advice I can give people is have those numbers available to you. Follow some really good groups on Instagram to make sure they're the ones that are alerting community, or go to a nonviolent training that are happening almost every day throughout Arizona.
Do you think it's beneficial? You were talking earlier about school board meetings too, and that was one thing that when you're talking about retention, for those of you who don't go to your local school board meetings, I mean, even looking at the agenda, they have consent
Yeah.
agenda items. I can see in my own kid's school district every month the number of teachers that are leaving, and it might only
Yes.
be 3 or 4, but when you have 3 or 4 people ending their contract every year, so the school, I think getting into our school boards is extremely important. I wanted to remind
Yeah.
people to do that. Even if you don't have children in the district, you are still a community member. Is it helpful at all for us to ask our school board, what is your plan if
Yes.
ICE
Yes.
comes to our neighborhood? Like,
Yes. It's always great to go up and ask questions, and which again, you can't do at charter schools or private schools. But public schools every other week, we're there, dinner and a show, we used to call it, that you go every week and listen and go to the microphone. They're your neighbors. The people you elected to be school board members are your neighbors. That's why we love public schools, is that they can be held accountable and you can question them.
yeah. I I don't see anything in the question and answer, but I do want to remind the people watching in the chat there are some important links in there. So take a look at that. Marisol put a link in there if you want to write to your legislators about a couple of those bills. Beth has also put some good links in there. So just make sure you guys check that out before we leave. I know this weekend our legislative action education team will be looking through what has passed because this is crossover week and trying to prioritize the multitude of bills, as you said, that are out there. So just one last opportunity. Are there any other bills that we haven't talked about that you think are really crucial for us to be aware of? And it might be no. We've talked about a lot. We talked about 1, 2, 3. We talked about the tax on the educators. It's something I know that we have noticed. You were talking about the unfunded mandates, and that I find very interesting is every year the bills come in, as you said, with you've got to do this, even though we have state standards, and then it's a school district's job because, as you said, we are electing our school board members. They are our local control. It's their job now to decide how we teach these standards. The legislature is full of you have to do this, and now you have to do that, and now you have to do this, and you have to have, there was one in there, I don't know if it's passed yet, a civics education week. Okay, well, yes, everybody wants to do civics education, but let us figure out when we're going to do that. But on the other hand, we're giving the money out without any accountability. So I just kind of want to emphasize that again. If you're watching bills, if you're paying attention to legislation, pay attention to those requirements they're putting on teachers and the unfunded mandates in opposition to what is being given out in the voucher system.
Yeah, I mean, we have one bill that we'd love for you all to look at. It's HB 2575. This is what we would call an it's called an anti-Semitism bill, but really what
Mhm.
this does is create a whole different way of suing
Yeah.
individual teachers personally, which does not currently exist. If something happens in a school district, you sue the district because we are an employee of the school district. And this is just we put a lot of pressure on. The governor vetoed this exact bill last year. And so we were trying to do the same thing and put pressure on the governor to veto this bill as well. This is so beyond explanation. It defines what anti-Semitism is, which is inappropriate for a legislature to do. And then two, it allows a person to sue. Look, I work with eighth graders. There are 18 stories to everything that happens. There are so many sides. And what should always happen if your child comes home and says, Mom, my teacher said this, you should just pick up the phone and call the teacher and we can have a conversation about it. This loops out that direct communication with the principal, with the school district, with the school board, and just goes as a parent. And I'm going to sue you as a teacher, as a worker. It just boggles your mind if you think if something falls on you at Fry's, do you go and find the closest clerk and file a lawsuit against that clerk? Like, this is ridiculous, and we put a ton of pressure, and so that one did get through everything, and so it did cross over. And then the bills I mentioned before, both of those, the only one that did not get heard last night was 2040. But
Mhm.
you remember they went till 2 a.m. this morning.
Well, and also they can strike things
Yes.
once they've crossed over too and make
Zombie, zombie,
bills.
zombie bills are our biggest fear, as
Yeah.
always. We are open for business for terrible ideas until July 1st, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we are almost at the end of our time. I just have one comment that Gatel wanted to remind everyone that our vote411.org, excuse me, our virtual voter guide does cover federal, state, county, city, and school board races and includes answers by candidates to nonpartisan questions written by the League of Women Voters. So keep that in mind that that's a good place to go to when we start electing people and voting for people. I would like to personally thank Marisol, Beth, and Donna for educating us. It's a lot of information. It's a lot to keep up with what's going on, so we appreciate you being here. I encourage everybody here to follow these organizations and to follow our legislative advocacy newsletter that comes out every Monday. I know several of the bills that you guys have mentioned we are currently studying. So thank you all. That's it. Thank you for coming. If you guys have any questions as participants, send them to the advocacy email and we will see what we can do. And thanks. And look for the ballot initiative from Save Our Schools when that comes out. We'll be looking for that. All right. Thank you all.